The paper that I'm going to present is joint work with Dean Yang and Lassa Brune, who are both at the University of Michigan, and with Javier Ginet at the World Bank. There are many reasons that people may want to save money. So we can think of a number of different motivations. One is that they want to save money in order to be able to smooth their consumption. Another is that they want to save money because they have a precautionary motive. So they want to make sure that they have money available to them if they have a need in the future where they're going to need to have some cash on hand. A third motive is to be able to make investments. And in the context that we are studying, particularly investments in agricultural inputs. It's that investment motive that we are focusing on in this paper. So the previous literature tells us that the return to saving and investing those savings can be quite high. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's the return to fertilizer that is most salient. And in research in Kenya, we see that profits can increase by about 70% for using the appropriate level of fertilizer. We have reason to believe that the returns to using fertilizer on cash crops in Malawi are also going to be high. Very few farmers are using the appropriate level of fertilizer for either their maize, their staple crop, or for tobacco, which is the cash crop in Malawi. And in response to this and to the understanding that fertilizer is valuable, the government invests very heavily in a subsidy program to help provide fertilizer to farmers. So what we're looking at is ways to allow farmers to be able to invest in fertilizer on their own. So what I will present today are the results from the third in an ongoing series of experiments designed to understand ways that we can help farmers access financial tools that improve their agricultural investments and increase their income. The first project was a study of insurance to help farmers cope with the possibility that they wouldn't be able to repay a loan. The second project was looking at ways to improve repayment rates for microfinance in a context where there are not formal identification means like a national ID system. And this paper is meant to encourage people to save for their own input purchases and to address some of the challenges that they may face when trying to save, some of the things that Emily has already mentioned. So in particular, we do that by offering people different types of savings products, an ordinary savings product and a commitment savings account. A commitment savings account is a special type of a savings account that functions a lot like a fixed deposit. So we can have commitment to deposit money into an account, and we can have commitment to not take money out of an account. The products that we work with in Malawi combine elements of the two. So people have the opportunity to make a plan in advance, and these accounts help them stick to that plan if behavioral biases or other factors in their lives might have driven them away from a plan that they made for themselves because it was in their best interest, but have trouble following through on. So in order to explain this project, it's easiest to start by talking about the agricultural cycle in Malawi. The harvest takes place at the end of the rainy season. So most tobacco and maize are harvested in the period May through July. That's when a lot of the tobacco sales occur. Tobacco is sold through a national auction system that I'll talk about more in just a moment. The planting season takes place in November and December. It's followed by the rainy season, and the months at the end of the rainy season are a period where many smallholder farmers in Malawi experience food insecurity. It's sometimes referred to as the hungry season. So the real challenge for many people who are growing cash crops is to have savings that span the period from when they've harvested their crop, sold it and received money, until they need to purchase inputs for the next season. So we are looking at savings products that help people move money from the end of harvest until the beginning of the planting season. What we do is we implement a randomized controlled trial to let us look at the effect of savings accounts on savings themselves, so a kind of a mechanical effect. Do these savings accounts actually increase savings? On input use and farm profits, We want to compare the effect of two different types of savings accounts, a traditional liquid savings account with this commitment account that has a period of illiquidity. And we would like to understand the mechanisms that explain why the commitment account may work. Now, I'll give you a bit of a preview now that in this paper, the mechanisms turn out to be a bit of a mystery. So commitment savings, as I mentioned, are a very commonly discussed mechanism for increasing savings. The idea is that people choose to lock away their own money from themselves for a period of time. So the idea is that they are aware that they are going to be tempted to save money, and they enter into an agreement with themselves and the bank that locks the money away. So what this means in our situation is that customers choose an amount of money that they want to have diverted from their profits in one season, held in an account until a date that they have chosen, when it will be released to them so that they can withdraw it from the bank and make purchases for whatever they choose. Now, these commitment accounts can be extremely helpful if the reason that people have trouble saving money is because they face this dual self problem, this time inconsistency problem that means that they make a plan that says, I want to be patient and save, but then when they have money in their hands, they are tempted and impatient and not able to save. On the other hand, if people have trouble saving money because they experience shocks and need that cash to cope with the shocks, then having the money locked away in a commitment savings account could actually make them worse off by impeding their ability to respond to those shocks. So we don't yet have a lot of evidence about the net welfare impact of these commitment savings products. There are many types of demand for commitment. Some of these are these self-control problems that we've already spoken about, but another set of problems relate to problems from the social network, to pressure to share money with other people. And it is possible that by making assets less liquid, the commitment savings accounts can help people deal with both types of problems. So let me tell you a bit more about our study and then get into the results. Our sample is of about 3,100 tobacco farmers. They are all borrowing from a local microfinance organization, from Opportunity International Bank of Malawi, as it was called at the time. And they are borrowing money for the inputs that they need to grow tobacco. They are members of borrowing clubs, and what's important in this context is that these clubs are not just the mechanism for borrowing, and the joint liability is sort of weakly enforced in these clubs. But the clubs are also the way through which farmers access tobacco sales. Tobacco in Malawi is the main export from Malawi, and it's sold through a centralized auction system. Each member of a club sells tobacco using the club's registration number. Money from that sale is then put into the club's joint savings account, an account that officers of the club can use to receive money and distribute it to the members of the club. There is an agreement between the auction company and the bank that when money is deposited into the group account, it is first sent to the bank to repay the group's loans, and then when the loan has been repaid, the money is available to the club officers to withdraw. So our intervention builds on the fact that there's actually direct deposit, in a sense, built into this system. People are not being paid directly in cash. Money actually flows through the bank, and our intervention takes advantage of that. So the randomized controlled trial that we implement involves the treatments are focused on two different types of savings accounts. So what is not experimental, what everyone in our sample gets, is they get help with opening an individual savings account. So these are people who are members of groups that have access to a group savings account, but they do not necessarily, and most of them do not, have their own individual savings accounts. We help them open individual savings accounts, and we help develop a system where their money can be moved automatically from the club account into the individual account. The part that we do randomize is whether people are offered an ordinary savings account or an ordinary account and also a commitment savings account. We randomize at the club level, so everyone in one club gets the same type of account offer. Everyone is getting the same financial education, but half of the clubs are getting, well, I'm sorry, 1/3 of the clubs are in the control group, where they don't get any individual accounts. 1/3 are getting these ordinary liquid commitment liquid accounts, and 1/3 get ordinary accounts and commitment accounts. We have a second intervention because we're interested in studying the mechanisms. So what we want to understand is, are these commitment savings accounts helping people solve an other control problem, a sharing problem, not just a self-control problem? And so what we want to do is we want to create variation in how much pressure people face to share their money. And we do that by having a treatment that either hides or reveals people's savings balances to other members of their group. So the way that we do that is we offer a raffle incentive, and people get tickets for the raffle based on their savings balances. In some clubs, those tickets are given out in secret. So an individual knows how many tickets he received, but his friends do not. In other clubs, the tickets are given out in public, and because the number of tickets is so closely related to the savings balance, it serves as a strong signal to others about how much an individual has saved. So what we do is we cross-randomize. We have 3 conditions for the savings account: no intervention, ordinary only, or ordinary and commitment. And we also have 3 conditions for the raffle: no raffle, public distribution of tickets, and private distribution of tickets. That means that we're able to compare having a commitment account to having an ordinary account, and to look at whether the effects are different when there is public or private distribution of the raffle tickets. So going back to our timeline, the baseline survey and offering the savings accounts takes place just before the harvest. Then the 2009 harvest occurs. We distribute the raffle tickets in the period after people have sold money and had that money in their accounts. The planting season occurs, the hungry season occurs, the next season's harvest, the 2010 harvest, takes place, and then we do an end-line survey. We also have administrative data about savings accounts that span the entire survey period. So what do we find? First, just offering people commitment savings accounts has substantial effects on the amount that they have saved just before the next planting season, and more importantly, on these things that we think are more direct measures of well-being. So it has large effects on the amount of inputs that these farmers are using, and on their crop output and household expenditures, measured almost more than a year later. There is no significant effect of just offering people ordinary savings accounts. So the commitment accounts lead to these strong improvements in agricultural input use and in outputs, but the ordinary accounts do not. But, and here's where things start to get a little bit confusing to us, and where we think more research is really important. These effects do not seem to be taking place through the tying of hands. It's not actually the locking the money away in the account that was what really mattered. And the way that we can see that, and I'll show you, is that very little money actually wound up in the ordinary savings accounts. And that is largely due to the fact that 2009 turned out to be a very poor tobacco harvest. So when people made plans about how much money they wanted to put in their ordinary account and in their commitment account, most people didn't actually earn enough that any money went into their commitment savings account. So how these savings accounts worked had something to do with psychological factors rather than the mechanical or banking feature of tying of hands. We can't pin down the mechanism, but we think that there are a couple of possibilities. One possibility that we do not have, we are not able to provide evidence in support of this, is that it helped reduce these pressures to share. Another possibility, and something that is really a hypothesis, we can't test it here, but we are testing in the future, is that this had to do with mental accounting, that people thought about savings differently in ways that changed their behavior. So I'm going to skip this here and show you some results. And I'm sorry for all of the numbers right after lunch, but what I am showing you here is two rows. The top row tells us how much more people who were offered commitment savings accounts, how much more likely they were to make a deposit into their individual accounts than people who were offered no accounts. The second row tells you how much more likely people who were offered the ordinary account were to make a deposit. So what we see is that people are not only depositing, not only making some deposit, but these deposits are substantial. So the amount of money that people are depositing is about 150 US dollars. What you can see is that the amounts deposited in the commitment and ordinary accounts are nearly the same. So the amounts ever deposited into the accounts are the same. That's likely because this intervention didn't change people's profits. What we do see is that there is a stronger effect, of course, on deposits into commitment accounts in that commitment treatment. So not much difference in the amount that people have saved, but what we do see is big differences in the amount that they invest. So people in the commitment account grew about 4/10 of an acre more tobacco a year later in the 2010 season than people who were offered no individual savings account. The effect for people in the ordinary account is basically zero. So being offered a commitment account increased the amount of land that you planted with tobacco by about 10%, but there was no effect if you were offered only an ordinary savings account. People who were offered a commitment savings account used just over $100 more inputs than people who were not offered any individual savings account. That increase in inputs is twice as large as the increase in inputs for people in the ordinary account. The increase in inputs is statistically significant, so we're confident that it was due to the treatment for people offered the commitment account, but we can't make any such claims for people who were offered the ordinary account. We also see effects on revenue. So people who were offered the commitment account had much larger revenues, and though the effect on profit is not statistically significant, it's just, if we had had a larger sample, a larger experiment, we think that it might have been. It's a quite substantial effect, okay? We also see that people were able to afford a higher level of expenditures had they been offered the commitment account than the ordinary account. And this effect persists even a year after the account offers were made. So, what we can't tell you is how exactly this works. Our initial hypothesis was that it was about locking away the money. But that turns out not to be the case because the money actually wound up in the ordinary accounts. So these accounts help people who had them or were offered the account but didn't necessarily use it. We don't have conclusive evidence for what was going on. We can hypothesize that it might have been psychological factors. The differences, the raffle account shows that there's no differences in the effect for people offered public, private, or ordinary raffles. So people who faced more pressure to share money did not experience different effects of these accounts. And that's weak evidence against the idea that it was really helping people solve this pressure to share money. The best that we can do at this point is guess, is speculate that maybe what was going on is that the accounts changed the way that people thought about their savings and their goals. They thought that this was money that they were saving deliberately in order to invest in. So in some sense, this is really good news. These are very positive, very strong effects of commitment savings accounts, not just on savings levels, but also on outcomes that we care about, like agricultural investments and agricultural proceeds. On the other hand, it's a bit of a puzzle. We don't know exactly why these effects took place, and we are currently following up with this in Malawi, trying to disentangle some of these mechanisms. Thanks.